Okay, we have blinky green. No clutch. Hard to gauge speed without the motor. Hard to tell if you're spinning too. Definitely notice the weight. Definitely does not lack the torque. You can definitely feel the weight on this thing. Very heavy. Definitely has torque for days. If it were my bike, I'd probably put like a half-stop throttle on there or something. Okay, first things first, do I like the bike? As a platform or a concept, yes. E-bikes are cool, I'm involved in making e-bikes, I love them, I have no concerns about e-bikes being a fun thing, unlike some people. I did not need to be convinced of that. But as the bike is right now, as a motocross bike, I really don't. It's okay. But if you look on paper at the specs of the bike, the reasoning behind this is pretty obvious. First, the major issues I noticed were power delivery, weight, suspension, and tire spin. It has equivalent horsepower and torque to modern 450, about 50 horsepower and 40 foot-pounds of torque, which is 7 less horsepower than a KTM and a couple more foot-pounds of torque. But it weighs 259 pounds, which is 37 more than the KTM. And it's already obvious what the problem is going to be. It's going to be weight. The weight is really evident off hard landings. On corner exit, the linear power of the electric motor, without the need to shift, of course, pretty much negates the weight. But on hard landings, you come down and it just feels like you're a rock dropping out of the sky. Now, what's funny is I actually really enjoyed some of the heavier bikes, like the Honda 450. Because I feel like the weight is well distributed and you don't really notice it. But on this one you definitely notice it because it's all right there in that front part, and as soon as you land your arms go down, the front end wants to tuck. It actually gets kind of sketchy. So coming through ruts and corners, you definitely notice the weight as well. It's pretty difficult to navigate ruts if you come in and you aren't perfectly set up. It's going to be real hard to make those little precise movements here and there, jumping in and out of ruts. Exiting the corner, it's mostly okay, but it kind of feels like you're driving a muscle car with ball tires in the rain, right? You get on the gas and it just wants to fishtail everywhere because it's got so much weight in the front and it's so powerful. So it's actually even worse than a 450 in that regard for one main reason, I think, which is that you can't hear the motor. Tire spin was a big issue for me because on a 450 or 250, whatever, you can hear the motor, spinning up, freewheeling. You know that your bike is spinning based on the revs of the bike and to a lesser extent the vibrations. On the Alta, there's none of that, so that's actually going to be an interesting thing to fix because there's only like two ways you can fix that. Number one is add an artificial sound, which of course is questionable and kind of defeats the purpose of the silent e-bike. Or two, you can add traction control. Now artificial sounds are going to have to be really loud to overpower other 450s on the track, so I don't know about that. And traction control I would never advocate for any bike or car, so I certainly wouldn't advocate for that either. So we'll have to see what they end up doing with that. The other problem is the power delivery is a little off. And now this is easily programmed or fixed with a different throttle or tuning or whatever. So that's not too bad, but the first half of the throttle in stock has almost no power, and the second half it comes on like crazy. So first off, your wrist is twisted really far back to get all the power, which kind of puts you in an unnatural position. And then 2, you really have to be careful about when you crack it open. On a 450, since you have the clutch and a lot of your power is in the first half, you can kind of manage it a little bit easier. On the Alta, you have to pretty much make sure you're pointing in a straight line when you crack it open. You know, you got to kind of think of it like you have rockets on your bike. They're great for accelerating, not that great for turning. The suspension is not very pleasant either. I'm sure that this is due to the weight, but like I said, the hard landings are really harsh. It was difficult to navigate the ruts, and you have to be really methodical about how you ride it. Now, of course, with all these issues, you could learn to ride around them, as you could learn to ride around any bike's issues, but that kind of defeats the purpose. You know, Ashley Fiolik rides while she's deaf, so she doesn't need to hear the motor, you know, so certainly you don't as well, but it's just things that you've come to grow used to, things that you enjoy about the riding. Those are going to be kind of difficult to fix, difficult to overcome. So, with the suspension the way it is, the weight the way it is, the power delivery the way it is, most of those will be fixed with technology. The power delivery will be fixed by tuning or personal preference on your throttle choice. The weight will be fixed by additional technology of lighter batteries and motor, so on and so forth. But there are a couple parts of technology that they really need to figure out. One is the overheating, and this is what we've noticed on our mountain bikes. The e-bikes, even with low power, they want to overheat really easy. And Jason, the owner of this bike, he overheats the bike in about 4 laps. It's about 8 minutes on our track. So it's kind of difficult because the batteries would last about 15 to 20 minutes, but the overheating makes it not last very long. So if you're someone who likes to ride really long motos, the battery's not going to get you there anyway, and more realistically, it's going to overheat before then, especially if you're an intermediate or an expert level rider. And then the other issue is that the bike's cost is really high. You're looking at like 12 grand for the bike itself, another couple grand for the generator and the 240 volt charger, which are both kind of necessary. So it's about 14,000 when it's all said and done. And when you think about it, you know, you can have a play bike that you can only ride for about 20 minutes at a time, maybe 2 times a day, or you could have a brand new 450 either as a second bike or as another main bike or whatever. It's kind of hard to justify that cost unless you've just got a lot of money or you're just really interested in the e-bike situation. So as it is right now, I cannot in good conscience recommend this bike. It is cool, it's fun to ride, it's unique. You have to really switch up your lines and think about what you're doing in a different way than a 250 or a 450 or even a 2-stroke. So it's definitely interesting, but until they get these little issues figured out, the battery weight, the battery charge, the overheating, so on and so forth, I say it has a couple more years to go before it's a viable bike.